curious on what's your story of faith? How did you come to faith in Christ?
Yeah, I didn't grow up in a Christian household. I don't have a memory of going to church as a kid. My mom brought us, but I was young, and I just don't have any real memories of that. I started my journey of faith, I think it was between my junior and senior year in high school, and I started it really coincident with my closest friend, a fellow named Brad Shannon. Brad recently passed away. For the first 25 years of my life, he was the person that I was closest to outside of family. And I remember asking a lot of questions. My sister is 5 years older than I am, had come back for that summer. She was actually interning at a church. And for reasons that are just unknown to me, these questions started to come. If there was a deep longing for faith to try and meet some need, I wasn't aware of it. That could have been a factor, but at least consciously speaking, that wasn't a driving force. And so Brad and I would talk about it, and then I got a notepad from my dad's notepad. And I remember jotting down all of these questions and asking my sister, who was extremely important in that journey, very intelligent and thoughtful, and but didn't pretend to answer questions that she couldn't answer. So that started the journey, and it was for me a long journey. I would say heavily intellectual for the early part, not easy. I remember telling Patty that I felt like faith was sort of like sand in the gears for me. It just didn't come very easily. And I also remember actually at a relatively early stage in that journey, when I would read the words of Paul, I was slightly intimidated because I thought, this was a person who was reaching the limits of language in terms of what he was expressing, in terms of his love for Christ and God, and how animating it was to his life. And I thought, that's an impossible standard to meet. How do you fall in love with a figure that you don't see, that you just read about? And even the Gospels, in many cases, aren't beautiful poetry. It's just sort of straightforward history. And so part of it was like, how do you even enter into this? But there were key people along the journey for me. When I went to University of Washington, I was at University Presbyterian Church and met a pastor who was head of student ministry at the time, Steve Wehner. Steve later became president of InterVarsity and Columbia Theological Seminary. And Steve was an important early figure in my life, really a model for me, a person that I looked to and thought there's an individual of integrity who modeled faith. I developed a trust with Steve. So even though when I didn't know him that well, I went to him. I remember when I was in college with some issues that I was really struggling with and had never shared with anybody else. But I had enough trust in Steve that I felt like I could go to him. And that was an important moment and a bonding moment for me. Steve was a significant figure really throughout the rest of my life. He passed away in 2015. Tragically. Then I came to Washington, D.C. I came through an internship when I was a senior at University of Washington. And then for me, the cross became central. And that sounds a bit obvious if you're a person of the Christian faith, but I'll explain what I mean by it. Because I had a lot of these questions, which I continue to have to this day, and discuss them with theologians and pastors and others, but they were often at least a quasi-referendum on God's character. And I came to believe in the truth of the crucifixion and the resurrection. I actually did a college paper on that topic at University of Washington, which is not a Christian school, on the case for and against the resurrection. So I did a lot of research into that question, and I came to believe that it actually happened. It was the central event in human history. And what happened is there was some dawning realization, not only of the centrality of the cross, but that was emblematic of God's character toward us for all time, that was, in a sense, the climactic statement of God's love for us and devotion to us. And so whatever the answer to those questions were, they were consistent with God's character that was demonstrated on the cross. That didn't answer the questions of theodicy and a lot of other questions, but it did insulate God's character with these questions. So that was an important moment. And then I just been hugely blessed and helped by countless individuals along the journey of in all sorts of ways who've leaned into my life, the life of my family, and modeled to me what it means to be Christians of integrity.